So I guess we can move on to the final part of the show if you want.
Yeah.
The loose topic. So this is actually a story that broke, but we're going to convert it into a loose topic, which is Nintendo has officially ended production of the Nintendo 3DS family of systems after about 10 years. The console was released back in 2011, sold over 75 million units. So we're going to kind of do a retrospective and look back at all these years that the 3DS has been around. Now, obviously, the 3DS launch was not the easiest thing in the world. They launched at a certain price point with a certain lineup, didn't resonate too well. They dropped the price shortly after to not the best reception, and obviously that's when they kind of launched the ambassador program as kind of like a sorry about that to the early adopters of the console. So I mean, at the time it wasn't looking great for them, but and not to mention about a little bit after, a couple months, about a year after, PlayStation comes out with the Vita, this powerhouse of a machine that at the time, in comparison, the 3DS was not even coming close to in power. So, I mean, things were looking a little dark coming off of the fact that the DS was this insanely popular handheld device. The fact that its 3D sequel was not hitting the right. In 2012, the Wii U came out and flopped. Nintendo was in a weird place, but they stuck by it. They had incredible Pokemon games, Animal Crossing, Metroid. You keep naming it. And so ultimately, after all those years passed, the IP won out. Quality games won, and I mean the 3DS ended up moving 75 million units, which is not their best selling handheld, but nothing to snuff your nose at. And ultimately, I mean, kind of look at the shape of the Vita. So who would have thought that all those years later they would have turned it around so much? And I was very critical of the 3DS for a long time when it came out, but ultimately once I got my copy, I loved the Mario Kart game was on it. I really developed quite the love for the 3DS. So what's your relationship with the 3DS?
So, I was always back and forth. Obviously, so when it came out, I wanted to purchase it, but I was not going to spend $250 on what I thought was another reiteration of the DS. I didn't understand this was like its own system. Very much the way I thought it was like DSi, where it's like you guys just can't keep adding letters to it, and I thought the 2-camera thing on the back was dumb, and I was like, I don't get it. So when they did do that price reduction, when it dropped to like $170, I want to say it was like under $200. Walmart actually had it on that new price sale early, so I bought it. I qualified for like the ambassador program, which was sadly the only way you ever got SNES games on the 3DS. They never put that virtual console out on there. For some reason they only locked it behind. So, never understood that. So Nintendo did weird things. But that launch lineup was very scarce. They had Star Fox 3D, and then later they had, I want to say they had Ocarina 3D remake was close to launch, if not at launch, and it was fine. I remember playing those two games for a little bit. It sat on my shelf for a long time, and I almost forgot I had it for a while, just because the titles weren't there. I've always had an issue with like how the circle pad was cool, but like the buttons were super small and things like that, and all these AR games were not gonna do it. But obviously after some time the games started coming out, when you started getting the Pokemon games and you started getting all these other things coming out, and I'm like, okay. And I even took some time to go back and play some old DS games that I haven't played in a while, and it's like the system has something. Then you go into thinking, the Pokemon games that came out, the Animal Crossing, which was the first Animal Crossing I was able to get like at launch and play tons of, because I didn't have a GameCube, I didn't have a Wii for way later, and I played some DS. I played some of the DS one, but not at launch. So to have that there, cool. It was so awesome to have, and it's interesting to see that like after so much time, like I was under the impression like these systems were already out of production, but because of all the iterations and stuff like that. But it's always sad to see a console kind of go away. Even though I've kind of said goodbye to my DS a while, every once in a while I'll break it out for something small. But if you think about these legendary games that it started getting, like even, excluding the remake, because we ended up getting Majora's Mask, which is one of my favorite Zelda games. We got that remade in 3DS. We got then Luigi's Mansion. The first one was remade for 3DS. We got the sequel to Luigi's Mansion after all this time, Dark Moon, on 3DS. And, all these other games that started coming out, that's where I fell in love with Fire Emblem, was on a 3DS.
Awakening,
really and then I played the Birthright version. So then Awakening, then Birthright was super popular into me, which led me into liking that stuff. To the impossible, and they got a Smash Brothers game running on there.
Insane.
to a mixed result, unfortunately, because of the 3DS. That one held back the Wii U version, but
Hey,
it was.
they got it working though generally.
But they generally got it working.
Yeah.
The characters were there. I was playing tons of it. Now again, Smash Brothers Smash 4 was a weird situation, but it's interesting to see them really stick by it, and to see the opposite when you have to compare a little bit to the Vita, where Sony was quickly to be like, well, if y'all don't want it, we're not gonna make games for it. So we never got the BioShock game that was in works for Vita.
Oh,
We
yeah.
never got all these other ones. The Infamous game for Vita was never released, and all these other games were never released. Where Nintendo's like, we're sticking by it. We're gonna keep cranking out the good titles. They could have easily been like, let's shut down and we move these games to, well, I guess Wii U. They had no option, but they stuck by it. And we've for a long time. It's been 3 years now since we really got the last swan song, which to me, is my understanding, is Metroid: Samus Returns.
Yeah, that was it for me. I don't know if they came out with anything after that point.
Yeah, the remake, and I'm like, well, that was really the swan song because the Switch was really popping at the time. So it's like, it's interesting to look back at it and be like, it's interesting. It's like, wow, it's a system that people thought was gonna fail. The games were $40-$50 at the time. Mobile gaming on iPads everybody was playing Angry Birds and all these other dumb games on there, and people kind of thought mobile gaming was dead. And here's, two of the biggest guys, Sony and obviously Nintendo, who's thrived in the handheld market, really stick by their guns and believe it, because without that, we wouldn't have the Switch nowadays, where we're playing Galaxy, Sunshine, and 64 handheld for most of the time. Like, you gotta give 3DS its props for that. Like, I've not played my 3DS in a while. I have it somewhere up here. And I have two, I believe, because I have my maroon one somewhere for the new
the most
3DS.
Beautiful one.
Yeah, so I have that somewhere, but then I have my new 3DS X. Well, I don't know what I have up here now. It's Pikachu. It's got a Pikachu on
Got
it.
you.
But now I play some of these older games on it and stuff like that. So it's always gonna hold a place in my heart, in my gaming history. Is like, though I had a lot of problems with the way it was and the lack of power and the stuff like that, but it also succeeded in the ways that I had to charge it every couple of days. That was it, because the battery lasted long.
Yeah.
Play Switch for 10 minutes. Play Switch for half an hour and your battery's down.
Dead.
So from hardware to software, it was really interesting. It was really Nintendo standing by. We can make games for this hardware, our hardware, despite it not being the powerhouse that was the Vita at the time, that was iPads and iPhones and iTouches. So it's a system I sometimes miss, and every once in a while I do break it out and I'll play an older game. Sometimes I do play like Brain Age on it sometimes, because it's like,
Brain Age.
what a throwback. And it's like, I miss the simpler times, especially what it represents to me. So that's my relationship with it. I hated it at the beginning. I had big buyer's remorse, but quickly I regained my confidence in Nintendo, and these games started coming out, and I was having a great time. And that's really what Nintendo's always sticking by, is we want games that you're having fun with. Sure, it wasn't the tear jerkers and artwork and masterpieces we were getting on PS3, PS4, and Xbox at the time, but they were fun games. They were games that I was having fun. It was making me smile, making me laugh at how dumb certain things were. And that's what it needed to be for me, and that's what it ended up being for me.
Yeah, and I feel like the biggest lesson we could take away from the 3DS is something that I feel like Nintendo's taught us many times, which is hardware and power are important, and that's good and all, but ultimately the quality of experiences, the fun you have, and just sticking by quality IP are ultimately going to triumph one way or another. And for all reasons on paper, the Vita would have decimated the 3DS. It was a powerhouse. You get to play Uncharted on the go, and how did that play out? Because ultimately Mario's going to Mario. One way or another. Zelda's gonna Zelda. Mm-hmm. Metroid's gonna Metroid. These are different types of IP, and they stuck by it. They didn't give up. Their whole, we're kind of over this. We're getting out of the handheld market. We're just gonna focus on our home console. That's not really something Nintendo does. You know what I mean? Like, we're gonna double down and we're gonna make this work. And yeah, we kind of botched the launch, but we're gonna stick the landing, and ultimately they did. And Nintendo's shown us that time and time again. We're like, did they have the strongest console on the market? Hell no. But are they holding their own? Yeah, for sure. And I mean, they've done it with the GameCube. They're doing it with the Switch right now. Like, we've seen them do this before, and it's really, really impressive. And I feel like 3DS, a lot of the rocky start that it had is going to be so dwarfed in its legacy of what it was able to accomplish in the years afterwards that, going down in history, people are not going to really remember it that negatively at all. They're not going to remember the ambassador program and stuff like that. No, they're going to remember the absolute classic games that we got. I mean, to this day, some franchises hit their peak there. There's a lot of arguments to be made that the best Animal Crossing's on 3DS right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a crazy statement to make, but like right now, in terms of like, does it have the best graphics in the world? No, but content. The content is there. The fun experiences are there. They found a way to integrate, touch and strange diorama style 3D. They're a weird company, but sometimes when they hit right. And I got to give the 3DS a lot of credit because, again, I was very critical of it when it came out. I was like, I don't want to play 3D Metal Gear Solid and 3D Street Fighter. But when Nintendo came out and they had handheld versions of some of their best franchises and at a really high quality, I mean, I had to give them credit. I was like, no, nobody else is doing this like this. And and they got the price right, too, eventually. And they kept iterating on it for years and years and years. I mean, longer than I thought they would have, so... Shout out to Nintendo. Shout out to 3DS. We will miss you. R.I.P. But we got the Switch now, so not that R.I.P. We don't really care that much. But,